Well, if you would, let's just bow together this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, this time in the service is a time where we come to hear from you. God, I just pray this morning that you would use me and the message that you've given me. God, that this would not be of self, that you would remove me from the picture, that this would be your message, and you would use it to your honor and glory. And God, I just pray that you would speak to our hearts. You would have your will in our lives. And you would do what you want to do. We ask this in your name. Amen. If you would, in your Bibles, turn to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20. In Exodus chapter 20, we find something that's very familiar to us. We probably have heard about it in Sunday school, and we probably memorized a lot of it during Sunday school. And if you had a creative Sunday school teacher, they drew out pictures to help you remember what the different order of things were. And kind of like a robber's mask, it looks like a number 8. Well, the 8th thing on the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not steal. There's all kinds of things to remember. But Exodus chapter 20, we find the 10 Commandments. And I want to start reading in verse number 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings and lightnings and flashes, the sounds of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, you speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak, lest we die. Moses has just led the children of Israel out of Egypt. Begin their journey to the promised land. And they come to Mount Sinai, and it's time for God to give to his people rules to live by, a code of conduct. They've been in bondage. They've been under martial law. They've been under the rule of the Egyptians. They've been slaves. So their code of conduct came from the Pharaoh. How they believed, how they acted, how they interacted, it all came from their master, who was a man. But now God is getting ready to give them a new command, and a new way of doing things, and new instructions. So he calls Moses up onto the mountain, and while Moses is up on the mountain, God is speaking to him, and he's telling him all the things concerning his people. And he talks to Moses about how they should sacrifice, how they should be, how they should conduct themselves, how they should interact with one another. In this transaction, God gives the Ten Commandments. He writes them down on a tablet, and he gives them to Moses. Moses begins his journey down the mountain, and he goes to, as he approaches the camp, what he sees angers him so deeply that he takes the words of God and he slams them on the ground. Moses has just spent all this time talking with God, and God has instructed him and talked with him. In Exodus 23, God is talking to him about other gods. Verse number 13, it says, "In all that I have said to you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other gods, nor let it be heard from your mouth." So not only in the Ten Commandments, we're not to have any graven images. There's only one God, and you're not to worship any others. But you're not even to mention other gods. Don't even talk about them. Now, the question is, well, what's the big deal? Well, why can't we talk about them? I mean, because there's so many out there. They just came from the land of Egypt, which Egypt has many gods. And they're traveling to the promised land where the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Jebusites and all the different ites live. And they've got all of their gods. So why can't we talk about them? Because there's so many of them out there. Well, God knew that if we begin to talk about them, that creates an interest. Have you ever heard of Molech? Anybody here ever heard of Molech, the god Molech? Okay, we've got a few. How many have never heard of Molech? Okay, so there's a whole bunch of you that haven't heard of Molech. Molech was a god that they worshipped, and this god demanded human sacrifices. And they would make a huge altar made of bronze. And inside this altar, it would be hollowed out. And inside the altar, they would build a fire. And they would get the fire so hot that the idol would glow red hot. And it'd have its arms out like this. And they would take babies. And they would sacrifice babies. They would place babies alive on the glowing arms of Molech. Okay? You just learn more about one God than what you'd ever want to know, right? Okay? Well, God was saying, don't even mention the name. Because he knew that it would pique an interest. Who is this god Molech? So let's go find out. Let's go find out about him. Let's go see what he's all about. Because see, they just came from a land where they weren't allowed to think at all for themselves. They were slaves. They weren't allowed to have any conscious thought at all. All they were allowed to do was follow the command of their master who held the whip. They've just been given freedom. They don't have a master now. They're free. They're following Moses across the desert. They're going to the promised land that God had given them. But they're no longer slaves. They're free. And all of a sudden, all these new ideas are open to them, and they can do with them what they want to. But they don't have the ground, they don't have the foundation, and they don't have the instruction of how to filter out what is good and what is evil. They don't have the training, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the personal relationship to God to guide them in their decision process. So God is telling them, for their benefit, for their protection, don't even discuss other gods. Well, Moses goes up onto the mountain and he begins to talk with God, and God is giving him the 10 Commandments. If you would, turn to Exodus chapter 32. Moses has been up on the mountain for some time. Verse number 1 of Exodus 32 says, "Now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, 'Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him.' And Aaron said to them, 'Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me.' So all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in the ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool, and made a molded calf. And they said, 'This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt.' So when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made the proclamation and said, 'Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord.' Then they rose early on the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up early to play. And the Lord said to Moses, 'Go, get down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I have commanded them. They have made themselves a molded calf and worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." And the Lord said to Moses, "I have seen these people, and indeed it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make you a great nation." Moses pleaded with the Lord and said, his God, and said, "Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak and say, 'He brought them out to harm them, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth'? Turn your fierce wrath and relent from this harm to your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self, and said to them, 'I will multiply your descendants as the stars in the heavens. And all this land that I have spoken of, I give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever.' So the Lord relented from his harm, which he said he would do to his people. And Moses turned and went down from the mountain. And the 2 tablets of the testimony were in his hands, and the tablets were written on both sides. On one side, and on the other they were written. Now the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, "There is a noise of war in the camp." But I said, "It is not a noise, a shout of victory, nor the noise, a cry of defeat, but the sound of singing I hear." So it was as soon as he came near the camp that he saw the calf and the dancing. And so Moses' anger became hot, and he cast the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. Then he took the calf which they had made, and he burned it in the fire, and he ground it to powder, and he scattered it on the water and made the children of Israel drink it. And Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you, that you have brought so great a sin upon them?" I want to back up. Back to the beginning of this chapter. Where did it all go wrong? Where did everything fall apart? Moses came to Egypt and he stood before Pharaoh and he said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh refused. And God brought plagues upon Egypt. And finally, Pharaoh decided that he better get these people out of Egypt. So he let them go at great sacrifice. And Moses began to lead the people out of Israel. They come to the Red Sea. They get to the Red Sea, and a miracle happens. The sea parts, and they cross on dry land. And as Pharaoh's army comes across behind them, the sea closes in above them and drowns the army. Now here they are at Mount Sinai. And they're awaiting the instructions of God. Moses goes up onto the mountain, and he's there for a purpose of hearing from God. He's there to bring the instructions of God. Well, it's taking a little longer than the people expect. And so they get together, and they take a vote, and they ask Aaron to create for them a god. And this is their words: "Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him." Let me pose this question. Was it Moses that brought them out of the land of Egypt? No. He was just the tool that God used. He was just the spokesperson that God stood before Pharaoh. He could have used Bob, George, Fred, anybody. He just happened to choose Moses, who had a speech impediment. It wasn't Moses that brought him out of the land of Egypt, it was God. So already they've downgraded God. They've taken away his majesty, his power, his importance, and they placed it in Moses. And Moses has been up on this mountain for a while, and there's a cloud that has settled in over this mountain. There's been a lot of rumbling and lightning, and there's some kind of something going on up on this mountain. We really don't know what's happened to him. He may be dead for all we know. So make for us a God that we can worship. This is a nice story of history. And we're sitting here this morning, you may be wondering, what does that have to do with us today? Idol worship still continues today. In 2015, we still worship idols. I'm gonna play a video for you. Part of what Andy did in this series was he put a CD together. And he picked out songs that, and there's some excerpts in there from sermons. And the music may not be the taste of everyone in the men's group, and that's fine, because that's not how he picked the songs. He wasn't picking songs based on a style of music. He was picking songs based on the message in the music. And the last song on the CD, for the last 6 weeks, has been gnawing and chewing and eating me alive. Thank you. I appreciate that. And so I want to share that with you this morning, and then I'm going to continue the ending of the service.
Clear the stage and set the sound and lights ablaze. If that's the measure you must take to crush the idols. Jerk the pews and all the decorations too, until the congregation's fueling half revival. Tell your friends that this is where the party ends, until you're broken for your sins. You can't be social. And seek the Lord and wait for what He has in store, and know that great is your reward. So just be hopeful, 'cause you can sing all you want to. Yes, you can sing all you want to. You can sing all you want to and still get it wrong. Oh, worship is more than a song. Take a break from all the plans that you have made, and sit at home alone and wait for God to whisper. Beg Him please to open up His mouth and speak, and pray for real upon your knees until they blister. Shine the light on every corner of your life, until the pride and lust and lies are in the open. Then read the Word and put to test the things you've heard, until your heart and soul are stirred and rocked and broken. 'Cause you can sing all you want to. Yes, you can sing all you want to. You can sing all you want to and still get it wrong. Oh, worship is more than a song. We must not worship something that's not even worth it. You clear the stage, make some space for the one who deserves it. Anything I put before my God is an idol, and anything I want with all my heart is an idol. And anything I can't stop thinking of is an idol. And anything that I give all my love is an idol. 'Cause I can sing all I want to. Yes, I can sing all I want to. Sing all we want to. clear the stage and set the sound and lights ablaze. If that's the measure you must take to crush the idols.
The words of that song are hard to escape. When Jesus Christ died on the cross, he brought to us freedom. He brought to us forgiveness of sins and forever freedom from the bondage of sin. And it brought to us freedom to worship him. No longer did we have to go to the priest and come before the priest and bring our sacrifices to the high priest and let him go into the Holy of Holies to worship God for us. The veil was ripped from top to bottom, and now we have audience with God himself. And we are free to worship. With freedom comes responsibility. With freedom comes the danger of excess. We can worship many things. In our culture, in our world today, there are many gods, little g. I took a trip to Canada one time when we lived in Warren. A group of us, high school or just out of high school, we were going to go across and eat some pizza over. There was a little place downtown that we would go to, downtown Windsor. And there was enough of us that we wouldn't fit in my little Chevy Chevette. So I borrowed my dad's car, which is a 1988 Bonneville, and it had all the bells and whistles, a nice and fancy car. All the controls for the radio on the steering wheel, sunroof. I mean, it was fancy for a 19-year-old kid. And we went across, we went over, we ate pizza, no problem, and we were coming back across the border, and they wanted to search the car. And they asked me to pop the trunk, and I did, and the guy says, "I thought you said you had nothing to declare." I said, "I don't. We ate pizza, and we're just coming home." He said, "Well, why is your trunk full?" I said, "I don't know." So I go back to the trunk, and the trunk is packed full of stuff. It has little tags on it with prices. My mom had been garage sailing for Vacation Bible School and had a trunk full of stuff. And what she was doing is they were doing a Vacation Bible School on foreign countries, and they were getting things from different countries. And sitting on top of all of this stuff was a Buddha. And I'm like, great. Hour and a half later, as I call my dad, and I said, "Dad, we're here at Customs, and we're getting ready to be arrested, and they're getting ready to tear your car apart to look for more stuff. You might want to come down here. They'll let you I'll let them tear your car apart in front of you. That way I don't get the beating for it." We can worship all kinds of things. And I mean, so much of the world today is worshiping things that are created by man. Some guy sits in a little corner shop with carving tools, and he carves and whittles on a piece of wood, and he fashions it into the form of a little man, and he sets it on, and they set it on a shelf, and they sell it, and that's a god. And we can worship these kind of things, these kind of idols, and that's easy for us to recognize. It's easy for us to say, "Oh, that's a god, that's an idol." It's easy for us to point those things out. Do you know that church can be an idol? Religion can be an idol. This building can be an idol. It's very easy for us in our culture and the way we value things to put more value on things than we do on Christ. To put more value on stuff than we do on the Creator who sacrificed his son on a cross. And we've gone a long time. Last Sunday we had the Lord's Supper. And it's been a long time since we had the Lord's Supper. A long time. We were without question. I wasn't questioned one time until the week before. Why haven't we had the Lord's Supper? The minute we take a banner down off the wall, we want to know where the banner's at. What's more important? I say this carefully. But if the decorations are more important than the message, we're worshiping an idol. The first Sunday I was here, I had a video clip that was very dark. It was very hard to see. And I changed the banner, or the curtain, like I did this morning. This one was hard to see also. Changed the curtain and was instructed that we don't do that here. Curtains have become an idol. If Jesus Christ, if we called him this morning, you guys, this may upset you, this message, and you may want to fire me when this is over with. And if you replace me next Sunday with the Son of God himself, if you were to hire Jesus to come and be the pastor of Cornerstone Baptist Church next Sunday, he'd have you all wait outside in the parking lot before you entered the sanctuary. His first act would be to bulldoze the building and say, go and make disciples. This building is not important. Yeah, it's nice to have a nice place to come and to gather together and worship. We're dry, and in the wintertime, it's very important. We're warm. Okay? But let me tell you something. It has nothing to do with worship. It has nothing to do with the Christ. I had the opportunity to go on a missions trip, Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota. I was still in the United States. I never left the United States, but going onto that Indian reservation was like going into a third world country. You would not believe the conditions that those people lived in. And that opened my eyes to some things. You know, they'd gather together in a mobile home that was set up on blocks walls had been knocked out and kind of halfway repaired to make space for people to have a meeting place to worship God. And that's in the U.S. That's here in America. I have friends that are missionaries across the country, across the world. They meet together in grass huts. They don't have decorations. They don't have air conditioning. They don't have any pews to sit on. They sit on dirt floors. I have a pastor friend that was going into Cambodia and Laos. He was teaching pastors was teaching men to become pastors, to share the gospel to their own countrymen. And they met together in secret because if the government found out what they were doing, they'd be put to death. These men would gather together and they'd have their meetings together, and they would gather together, and when they prayed, when it was all said and done, there'd be puddles on the floor where they'd be weeping, crying out to God. They don't care what the building looked like. It wasn't even the same building every time. They couldn't meet in the same place time after time because they couldn't set up a pattern. So they didn't even meet in the same building. This is not the church, people. You are. In the Bible, the word church, ecclesia, is called out assembly. It is not church building. Ecclesia, church, is the people. What's most important? God. I've wrestled with this for a long time. It's been something that's bothered me for a long time. And I've argued with God about it, and I've told him, I really don't want to talk about that, God. I really don't want to. I don't want to deal with it. He said, but you got to. But I don't want to. You have to. I don't want to. Andy hands me a CD. Said, here, this is music for the men's group. And I listen to it, and this song comes on, and I'm like, great. I know that there are traditions, and I know that there are things that mean a lot to us. And I know that there are things that we value. But if we value anything more, or we put an emphasis on anything more than Christ, it's an idol. The home that we live in, the cars that we drive, the clothes that we wear, the food that we put in our body, the things that entertain us, anything that we place in a higher value than Christ is an idol. I want to ask you, turn with me on this, we're going to close. Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy chapter 7, beginning in verse 1. This is the instructions that God gives to his people on how to deal with the people in the land, the promised land where God is leading them to, and the idols and temples and houses of worship. These are the instructions of God. When the Lord your God brings you into the land which you go to possess, and has cast out many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them, nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. So the anger of the Lord will be aroused against you and destroy you suddenly. But thus shall you deal with them. You shall destroy their altars and break down their sacred pillars and cut down their wooden images and burn their carved images with fire. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples on the face of the earth. They are instructed not only to go into the land and conquer the land, but to utterly destroy the inhabitants of the land. Go in and rip down the pillars, burn the idols, destroy them completely, remove all the utensils of false worship. I'm going to ask us to take a self-inventory. What is it that I'm putting in is more important than God? What am I holding on to is more valuable than God? What idols have I erected and I'm worshiping instead of God? Let's all stand together. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this opportunity where we could just take a look at your word. God, sometimes your words hurt. And sometimes the life that we have established gets astray. And we need to be brought back. Lord, I just pray that you would have your will here in this place, in the hearts of your people. And we would become the church as you intended it to be. We would serve you with all of our heart, mind, and soul. And we would set aside all the things that would distract us, all the things that could become elevated above you, all of the things that could rob worship. God, I pray that you would be in control and be in charge of this. Reveal to us the things that need to go. Reveal to us your heart. I thank you that you love us more than we ever know. In your name we pray. Amen.